So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Marc Metzer from Metzer Farms. And I've had the pleasure of going there several times. And it's a very interesting farm in a beautiful part of California in Salinas, very rich in agriculture. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Marc.
Okay. Hi, my name is Marc Metzer from Gonzales, California, Metzer Farms. We are a duck goose hatchery. We also have chickens and pearl guineas that we're hatching year round. We're shipping throughout the United States every week. And I just want to give you some information about waterfowl, different ways to grow them, and just some general information for you. Again, if you have questions throughout this presentation, go ahead and ask them, and I'll try to answer them as we can go. I'm going to stop just for a second. Was there a different, there wasn't a different presentation. I could go off of this one. My other one was very similar. Did you see that? Okay.
I'm happy to pull it up though. Why don't you just keep going and let's see what I can find.
Again, I could go off this one. It's just, it had updated pictures and stuff like that. So.
That is the one you had shared with me.
Okay.
Let me see.
I might have shared the wrong one. So it's, yes,
Okay.
that one.
So where is that one?
It is the most recent email.
Was I on that email? All right, why don't you forward it to me?
The red ones, eggs, and medium chickens.
It's going to be worth the wait. It's really good. I just have a lot more updated pictures. One new thing that we're doing is we're building 2 pasture pens. And what I wanted to do is show pictures of our pasture pens that we're using for ducks. It's quite common for pasture poultry with chickens, but I wanted to show you with ducks and some rollout nests that we're doing with those. And so this just had more pictures. We can start off with any questions if anybody has questions.
Which address?
How did your farm get started?
Good question. So my dad graduated from UC Davis. The day after he graduated from here, there was a local person that taught him how to sex ducks, baby ducks. And so he started Metzer Farms the day after he graduated from Davis. Our first ducks were bought by my grandpa, who was a English teacher in high school. And he really loved to garden, so he got ducks to help with the garden. And then some Filipinos stopped by the farm and asked for balut. And balut is a partially incubated duck egg that we pull out of the incubator before it hatches. And my dad made a business plan. I got to read it a couple months ago, still on handwritten paper and everything. And the guy was going to buy like 10,000 a week. Balut. And the guy never came through and bought them. So my dad hatched them and we became a hatchery. And he had to sell those baby ducks. And he quickly learned that you could sell a baby duck for a lot more than you could sell a balut. And all you have to do is keep it in the incubator an extra week. And the value is 3 or 4 times what it was as a balut. So we still do balut. We still do salted duck eggs for the Chinese market, but our main focus is the hatchery. Okay, so topics. I wanted to talk just a quick brief about Metzer Farms, different commercial breeds you could use for waterfowl, how to get them water, bedding, different housing options, whether it's permanent or a movable pen, some basic nutrition, egg washing, processing, marketing. I'm gonna cover just a brief on all this stuff. I'm not trying to self-promote, but you could go to our website and it's loaded with information. And just go there and you can learn a lot. It's just a good place to get information about the nutrition and really dial down your feed. So 1972 is when we started Metzer Farms. I wasn't born yet, but that's when my dad started the company. Again, he graduated from here, UC Davis. He was an animal science major. Like I said, started with balut and it quickly became a duckling hatchery. We hatch ducks year round, ship them throughout the United States year round, every week, and we use the post office. So just about everybody that is buying chickens at a feed store, those chickens are coming to the feed store through the post office. So we sell backyard people, feed stores, commercial farmers, ducks, geese, chickens, pearl guineas, and we have about 30 to 40 employees. And that is people on the farm with the breeding stock and people in the hatchery, hatching and shipping our orders. So different options for commercial waterfowl. You have ducks and geese. Ducks are quite more popular than geese. The thing about geese is, as far as I know, they're only offered seasonally, as in the goslings. You can't buy goslings year round. For ducks, you can buy them year round, so that's an advantage if you're trying to market them. You can have a constant supply. What we've learned from our customers who grow ducks for commercial purposes, they have a lot more success with selling to chefs than to individuals or farmers market. There is a skill with cooking duck, and chefs typically have that skill. I don't, and I'm a duck farmer. Ducks are very finicky when it comes to processing. You have to find your perfect day. It's going to be around 49 days, but some people it's 50, some it's 48, some it's 52. You have to figure out what works best for you. Diet may affect it, but we think it's more weather related. So if you're going to be growing them outside, it might not be this 50 days year round. During winter, it may be a different length. Muscovy take 12 weeks. Most of our customers process pekin at 7 weeks, but you can hold them until 12 weeks for a bigger pekin. The economics drops a little bit because you're going to be giving them a lot more feed versus the extra weight you're going to get out of them. So you could plan for about a 5.5 pound dressed duck at 7 weeks. Ducks for egg production, I think duck eggs are becoming more popular. Through our sales of female ducks, of the top 3 listed right here, Khaki Campbell, White Layer, and Golden 300, we've noticed the past 5 years that the amount of females we're selling of this breed that are orders of 30 females to 300 females is increasing quite a bit. And nobody is going to buy 30 female ducks to eat all those eggs by themselves. They have a business plan for those. In my experience, duck eggs sell for about $1 per egg retail. You can get more out of that if you're doing organic or if you're doing pasture raised. I also talk to people that are selling them for $6 a dozen. So obviously it matters who your clientele is, what part of the country you're in, but don't sell them for as much as you're selling chicken eggs. They're worth a lot more money. That's my only advice. They're a premium, so ask a premium for those. Geese for meat production, Emden can be grown. That's typically the high season for them is for the meat is for Christmas. But I think there is a willing market to buy brown and white Chinese geese. It's a smaller goose, but I think there's a Chinese market for those. And one advantage is if you find the right market, you could sell them live. So you don't have to worry about processing. And that'd be a good gig to have, is to just be able to grow them and sell them, because processing is a tough part and marketing is the toughest part. So once you find people that want them, I think that'd be good, because we keep our geese for 4 years in production. And so we're not always having our old breeders available, but when they are available, they get snapped up real quickly by just the San Francisco Bay Area, San Jose Chinese market. We work with one individual who resells live birds, and he's always asking for geese. Okay, water. This is a picture that I took a couple months ago from White Oak Pastures in Georgia. They are quite popular. One of the first, I don't know if I want to say one of the first, but they've been in lots of media for their pasture raised, organic, all natural. So we got to visit them because they are one of our customers for Pekin. As you can see, they use a trough water. They do move, I think, once a week. And as you could see, it's already getting muddy. We did tell them to use some plastic flooring around the water, which I think they just started using, and it's helping quite a bit to keep the mud down. They don't really have a problem with ducks jumping in the water, which is surprising, even though, as you can see, a duck could jump into the water. When we were there, we didn't see any jump into the water, but they do still make a mess. So nipple waters is what we are primarily using on our farm. They can be used inside and outside. Advantages are cleaner water, less wasted water. They're lighter than a big tank of water that you're trying to move if you're moving it often. Disadvantages that it could freeze easily. We don't have to deal with freezing where we are in Salinas Valley, but I know a lot of people do. So one way to negate the freezing or hot temperatures, if it's sitting in the sun, is to allow the nipple line to leak at the end by just turning it on slightly. I do know in some parts of the country that's not even going to help. It will still freeze. But that's why we use nipple lines. It's just they're cleaner for the duck and cleaner for the bedding. Bell waters. Here's a picture of them. Our geese are on bell waters and nipple waters. Bell waters allows them to dip more of their beacon into the water. But with the bell water comes mildew or fungus that will grow around it. So you have to keep them clean. And you still have a problem with freezing because there are 3/8 inch tubing that feeds them, and that could easily freeze. Bedding, rice hulls, straw, shavings. Picture on the bottom is inside of one of our barns. We use shavings. We spread them 2-3 times a week during the wet season, and it could be once every 2 weeks during the summer with the wind blowing to dry things out. So shavings work great for us. We tried rice hulls several years ago before I came back to the farm to work, and my dad said it caused some type of mold to grow inside of the egg. So, but there's people that successfully use rice hulls with ducks. So everybody's different. So if you have a source of rice hulls or other type of cheap bedding, I would say try it out. I know peat moss, some people swear by. We tried it once and our workers didn't like it. So we're sticking with shavings. Housing. So this is building number 1 is our first rendition of a pasture pen, movable. It's heavy, and I learned that when I tried to pull it, and the tires just spun on the tractor after some heavy rain. So building number 2 is, I took both of these pictures today, by the way. So building number 2 has only chicken wire all the way around it, whereas building number 1 had plywood halfway up. Now, the reason we wanted to do plywood halfway up is so that if a fox or dog or something came by, the ducks wouldn't see it and it wouldn't see the ducks, so they wouldn't get scared. But that doesn't happen so often, and I wanted to reduce the weight, so we just went with chicken wire all the way around. And then you can see right here with my mouse, and right here are the roll-out nest boxes. So those are actually suspended above the ground about 3 inches. And so that's where the ducks are laying the eggs. We had a solar panel here. We have a solar panel here, a battery in here. And then I bought the 45-foot outdoor hanging lights from Costco. They're LED, 1 watt per light bulb. I think there's 24 light bulbs. So that's how we're running 17 hours of light the ducks need per day. So the lights turn on in the morning, turn off automatically when the sun comes up with a light sensor that we have. And then as the sun drops, the light sensor senses there's no more sun, and the lights turn back on for another couple hours, which totals 17 hours of light. Bottom right is a mobile pen from Fogline Farm. They're about 2 hours north of our farm, just north of Santa Cruz, and I visited him. And this is just a hoop house that he had built from a local hoop house manufacturer that does hoop houses for berries. Whereas mine got from just a carport company that builds carports, and we converted it into a pasture pen. Brooding. So one thing about the difference between ducks and chickens for brooding, if you do a bad job brooding chickens, they'll die. If you do a bad job brooding ducks, they'll live and have stunted growth. So you're not going to learn that you're doing a bad job brooding until you're trying to process like a 3-pound duck, which you're not going to be happy about. And economically, you would have been better off if that duck didn't make it. But that's just the way it is. So dry bedding, clean and sanitize brooder room before you put the ducks in. Heat. Feed everywhere so they can't miss it, and water everywhere. this picture on the bottom left, that's feed all the way down, and here, all the way down. And then these are nipple lines right here. Now, this is actually a customer that we delivered chickens to. So these are chickens, it's not ducks, but it's just a good picture of what a good brooder looks like. And the heater up there. So this is actually a mobile pen in Vacaville area. I think they were imported from Europe. They paid a lot of money for them. Bottom right picture is one of our brooders with our baby ducks that will be our breeding stock for this year. So this picture was taken in around July of 2019. So these are all our mixed breeders. We raise them all together, and then as they get older and we move them into their laying pen, that's when we separate the breeds. So you can grow different breeds of duck together. You could grow your geese and your ducks together. It's not a problem. Lighting schedule, if you have the ducks for laying, start them off with 24 hours of light, take them down 1 hour per day until you get to 17 hours, and then stick with 17 hours the whole time. Density. Ducks, again, they are more messy than chickens, so you're going to need at least double the space you would give your Cornish cross chicks, for example. The more space, the drier the pen will stay. Some advice with throwing your bedding or shavings out onto the ground is don't think that you could throw twice as many shavings so that you could wait twice as long before you have to do it again. If you throw out a 3-inch deep amount of bedding, only the top ½ inch is going to get wet and get matted. And after a week, if you put your fingers through it, you're going to find 2½ inches of good bedding that is being wasted. So whenever we throw out our bedding, or I should say, put out the new bedding, spread the shavings is what we say. Do it as thin as you can. The thinnest layer you possibly can. Because basically what we've learned is you're just covering up the wetness and the manure from the last time. It's not as much absorbing it, it's kind of covering it. So you're having layer upon layer upon layer. And when you go out to clean out your pens, you don't want to see layers of shavings that were never dirtied in the first place, because that's just money going down the drain.
Have you ever thought about aerating your bedding?
Yeah, the question was, have you ever thought about aerating your bedding? I've thought about it a lot. I've never done it. I would think, I've always thought, which might be what you're referencing, 1-inch PVC pipe with holes in it going down the base of the bedding.
Well, I'm just thinking.
Mixing it.
Just a harrow.
Yeah. No, I've never done it. I don't know why it wouldn't work unless it just, my first thought is you would have to have a low enough density that it gives it time to dry before they just wet it again. But I think it could work. With us, most of the duck's life is spent in the lay barn where there's nests everywhere. And so you couldn't really efficiently, the way we're set up, we couldn't do it. But again, everybody's different with these type of, with this type of farming. So I think it'd be something worth trying. So for nutrition, you want to start them off on high protein and then move them down as they get older. Here on the PowerPoint right here is a very simplified version of what your nutrition should look like. Our website will break it down by vitamin and mineral for you to copy. And a lot more feed stores are offering a waterfowl feed, or you could even use like a poultry feed to start them off with. We do use pelleted feed, but you don't have to. You could just use whole grains and mix them, but you just have to make sure that if you're using whole grains and you mix them, you give them grit to eat. Lots of grit. It will help them break down the grains inside their stomach. If you don't give them grit, you're not going to be getting your money's worth with the feed. Because we pelleted the feed and crush it, the ducks don't require the grit because we're breaking down the food for them. Egg washing is very difficult with duck eggs. All I could say is if you're okay with an egg that looks stained and your customers are, that's fine. But I think people are used to a white egg that looks like a chicken egg, and duck eggs just aren't like that. So you're going to either have to scrub them a lot or educate your customers or the consumers that it's okay for duck eggs to be off color because they're just naturally, they are naturally. There are some chemicals out there or detergents, I should say, out there that will take off that outer layer or stained layer of the duck egg shell, which are fine to use. It's just an extra step that you're going to have to go through when washing your eggs. I can't tell you the best egg washer out there for duck eggs because I haven't found it yet. It's going to take more time for all of our duck eggs. We pre-wash them with warm water and a hose with a spray nozzle before we put it into the machine. And what we use is this Sani Touch egg washer here. And there's just a belt that you feed them in one by one. There's brushes and a little bit of hot water and disinfectant that comes out right in this stage. And then this stage, it's only brushes and a air dryer that dries the eggs. So there's different options. Again, just use whatever you find is easiest. These machines are expensive, so it might not be the best option when you first start out. Another issue with duck eggs is sizing. Now, we call a medium egg 82 grams. For a chicken egg, that's off the charts. So, in my opinion, I don't think you should an 82 gram duck egg should be called the same thing as a I don't know, 45, 50 gram chicken egg. You might want to think of just giving it another size name or do something different to differentiate it, because most consumers don't know that duck eggs are bigger than chicken eggs. So if you just say medium, they're going to think medium chicken egg, where in reality, a medium duck egg is like a super jumbo chicken egg, which is great, but packaging is tough. I have not found 6-packs that can hold our medium duck eggs, only dozens. So that is a problem. We offer a 6-pack, but it's plastic. And I know a lot of people don't like plastic, even if it's recyclable. So I don't have a good answer for you if you're looking for a 6-pack for duck eggs. Question?
Do you have a problem with shell breakage when you're washing or transporting them because they're larger, or is the shell just thicker?
The shell is a lot thicker. We do, but we do still have problems because if we ship through FedEx or the post office duck eggs and we put them in a dozen packaging that's made for jumbo chicken eggs, the eggs are so close together, when they get jumbled, they crack by hitting each other. So a chicken egg wouldn't crack with the same abuse in that egg carton, but a duck egg will, just because they're hitting each other. Even though a duck egg shell is a lot stronger than a chicken egg shell. If you're gonna ship them, I'd recommend shipping them in turkey flats. A turkey flat is 20 eggs. It's a 5x4 on a 12x12. And whereas a chicken one is 30. So there is a lot more space and they don't break because the space between each egg is a lot greater.
Along those same lines, that we could go back in regards to feed and then the strength of the egg. Do you ever put in oyster flour into your feed?
We don't, because we have our feed custom made. So we have enough calcium in our feed that we don't have to add oyster. We used to offer free choice oyster shell. The question was, can you repeat the question so I could put it through the microphone?
Sure. For the strength of egg in shipping and also in the laying, do you put in oyster shell or oyster flour?
Okay. The question was if we put in oyster shell or oyster flour into the feed. For shipping or making the egg stronger, we don't. We have calcium in our feed. We used to offer additional oyster shells, free choice, beside their feed pens, but we didn't notice any big difference. I'm not a nutritionist. What I've learned at like APA is that poultry are intelligent and they're going to eat minerals that they're lacking to supplement what they're not getting. And we just didn't see any advantage, and they weren't eating a whole lot of the oyster shell. So we took it away. As long as they have what they need for calcium, their eggshell is going to be a lot stronger. In addition, there's a thicker membrane right under the duck egg shell. So a lot of times if the shell breaks, there's not going to be any leakage because the membrane keeps it in. Meat processing, timing is important. It's 7 weeks is the general rule of when you need to process, or 12 weeks. Again, it could be a day earlier, a day later. Remember, if you were to order from a hatchery that mails them to you, they'll be getting to you on day 2 or day 3. So count that into your 49 days. Find a processor before you get the ducks, or talk to somebody that's processed ducks before you try to process them yourself. When my dad and I were at White Oak Pastures, they feed their ducks and turkeys whole grain wheat starting 2 weeks before processing. And they said that there's an oil in there that helps with plucking the feathers easier. I don't know the science behind it. They just said it works really well for them. They started it with their turkeys and then they tried it on their ducks and they noticed a difference. So do what you will with that information. You could use wax or no wax. Most of the people that I talked to at the APA conference this week, they did not use wax. They just used the water and the tumbler picker. A couple more pictures from White Oak Pastures. Reason I include them on this from the marketing is that I believe is going to be your hardest and most important thing you do if you're looking to start an enterprise with pastured poultry, alternative species, anything like that. They do a really good job. They give farm tours. They reach out to authors, publicists. I listen to them on NPR, Planet Money. So they're all over the place with media, and a lot of that is free media. Get to know your customers, budgeting. Although you're a farmer, your labor's not free. So price that into your pricing, because I'm sure your hope is that you could eventually hire help and they're not going to work for free. So you might as well work in the labor into your costs before you start rather than after. I received some questions before I came here, so I just put them as bullet points. So I'll cover these. But again, if you have questions, go ahead and ask. Vaccines. Waterfowl are pretty hardy. They don't need vaccines. We vaccinate for salmonella. That's the only thing we're vaccinating them for. Chickens, it's another story, but I don't know. You know, there's the Coxie and Megan-Vac for salmonella, for chickens and all this other stuff. Ducks, ducks and geese, it's pretty easy. Diseases and health, again, they're hardy. The most important part for them is the brooding stage. As I talked to farmers at APA, they said it's really hard to kill a duck. So, you know, if they get wet when they're adults, that's fine. Whereas chickens, it's a whole nother story. They could handle really cold temperatures. If it gets really hot, offer them some water to swim in, or spray water, a misting system, something like that. When we've gotten super high temperatures, I'm talking 105, we do see mortality in our pekin, not a lot, but all the other ducks are fine. So I would just say, keep an eye on your pekins if you have pekins during the really high temps. Seasonality, again, ducks year-round, geese are not year-round, so that might just be a specialty thing for your chefs. What I've realized is a lot of chefs, they can't be changing their menu when you're out of something easily, so they need consistency. Pricing, figure out your pricing, ask around. You should be demanding a lot higher price than where the chefs can get their ducks from, you know, a big food distributor or whatever. You should be demanding a higher price. Predators. So people use geese as predator control in their chicken flocks. But we have predator problems in our geese flocks, so they're not going to stop everything, but they do work, and people use them for hawks or predators that fly or predators on the ground. Housing design, again, it could be something that moves, something that doesn't. Let the ducks out during the day, bring them back inside at night. Advantage of duck egg layers is all ducks, they lay early in the morning. So you can let them out during the day and you don't have to worry about collecting eggs everywhere around the farm. And then you can put them back in at night. They lay their eggs before the sun comes up or right as the sun's coming up. And then you let them out. And again, you get to pick up all the eggs in the house. Egg handling and shelf life, as we talked, the shells are a lot thicker. With that comes a longer shelf life. I know that we're fine with eggs being 10 weeks old. I'm not going to push it longer than that, but I've talked to people that eat eggs that are longer than 10 weeks that have been in the fridge, and there aren't any problems with them. There are not any standards, as far as I know, in California for shelf life for duck eggs. So if you're going to put a shelf life, just be responsible for that. And food safety, food safety, biosecurity. Just be aware of who's coming on your farm, where they've been the last couple of days, what kind of poultry your employees might have at their house, what interactions your poultry are having with wild birds, and then just keeping a clean environment, and the sun does a good job disinfecting. Are there any other questions? All right. Yes.
Predator stuff. You talked about predators a couple of different times and showed us your housing. And I was just wondering, are there other specific things you're relying on for predator control? Is it fencing? Do you have livestock guardian dogs? What is it that you're doing to try to contain that?
Okay, so the question is, what are we doing to contain predators? Number one, good fencing around the entire property. We have 5-foot fence with just a line of barbed wire on top. So I know some places that's not going to stop everything, but we're in the middle of vegetable fields in the Slings Valley, so it works for us. We tried a guardian dog and all it did was run away. They are extremely athletic and impressive, but all he did was try to run away. So it didn't work. So that's what we're doing. But a lot of people have success with guardian dogs, really good success. All right, that's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, for the last part of our evening, and this is my favorite part of these workshops where we have these panels and we get to have farmers just talking about kind of what their farm is like, their challenges, how they got started. And to me, just as a researcher kind of at a university, this is the part where I think is hopefully the most practical aspect of the evening. We can do as many PowerPoints by kind of academics as we want. Those are interesting and hopefully practical, but I think this is really the element that I'm always the most interested in, I learn the most from, and I'm also the most inspired. Just to hear how hard farmers work is really impressive. It is a grind, and I have all the respect in the world for what they do. So with that, I'd like to introduce Molly Myerson from Little Wing Farm, and she's going to talk a little about her farm. And then after that, we're going to go have this roundtable with Mark and Molly, and people can ask additional questions. I'll ask a few questions, and we'll wrap up in about an hour. So thank you, Molly.
Yes, thank you. All right, like was stated, my farm is called Little Wing Farm. It's named after the quail, not a Jimi Hendrix song, just to be clear. That being said, I'm mostly a vegetable farmer. So I grow on about 2 acres a variety of vegetables and flowers. I sell my produce and flowers at a roadside honor system self-serve farm stand. Most of the eggs that I produce go to a restaurant in San Francisco. The farm is located in Point Reyes Station, which is about a little over an hour north of the city. And when I have extra eggs, I'll sell them at the stand. And they do quite well for being a very unusual sort of specialized egg. Oops, wrong way. And that's what they look like. I chose a breed that lays speckled eggs. There are quail that lay white eggs, but the speckles are just extra special and beautiful. And it was something that I thought about in terms of marketing. I thought that the coloration of these eggs would be more attractive to people. And as you can see, there's all different sizes. I sometimes will save the tiniest and biggest eggs from a collection in a day just because it's pretty fun to see the difference. So there's a bunch of different breeds of quail. The kind that I raise are a Japanese variety called Coturnix. There's also northern bobwhites. They lay white eggs. I think they're used a lot in the hunting world. They're raised to release and hunt. There's button quail, there's Gambel's quail. There's actually a lot of different varieties. I raise what is called a jumbo brown Coturnix, and maybe it's an oxymoron to call a quail jumbo, but they are the larger of the quail, and I chose them because they lay the largest eggs, and when it's time to harvest them for meat, they're more meat on a jumbo brown. When I first got into raising quail, I'll back up and say I wanted to be a chicken farmer. I saw that the market for pastured eggs was a really good one. It seemed to never be saturated. You can always sell pastured eggs, but to find enough land to raise chickens well is really difficult, especially in the Bay Area. So I ended up, luckily for me, figuring out that there's a smaller bird that needs a lot less space. It happens to be the state bird of California, so that was a lucky little coincidence. The eggs are beautiful and special. And I did what I'd done in the past with my backyard chickens is I ordered chicks off of a website, live birds that come through the mail. But they're so tiny. I don't know if you can see me, you know, they're the size of a quail egg, and traveling through the mail was really not great for them. By the time I had my chicks in their brooder for a few hours, half of them had died. So I really wasn't pleased with that result. And a friend of mine who had been in the agricultural business for a long time lent me his grandfather's incubator. So this was a machine probably from the 50s. And I hatched my own eggs, had a much better experience, 99% survival rate on the hatching. And it was a really wonderful experience, very exciting to see birds being born. So that's what I do every time I start a new flock of quail. This is a picture of the incubator that I have. It's fairly automated, so it'll turn the eggs for me. I have to monitor the humidity myself, but it regulates the temperature. And the more consistent you can keep those two factors in your incubator, the better your hatch rate. I was getting my eggs, actually fertile eggs, from eBay. There's a surprising number of providers that, you know, small farmers and backyard enthusiasts who provide fertile eggs online. This year I went with a local farm who breeds their own quail, Alchemist Farm. They're in a town not very far from me. And I've been really happy with the chicks that I got. Have had zero deformities. You know, every once in a while you'll get a bird with a crossed beak or splayed legs, and the birds that I got from them, they're really healthy, and I've been very pleased. So this is what it looks like when you open the little tray on hatching day. Quail take 17 days to incubate, and they are born essentially 17 days on the day. it's a lot of work getting out of an egg. They're wrapped up in there in a little origami shape. And this is just a very special experience to have, to see a little life form being born. So once they're incubated and hatched, they go into a brooder. For me, that's a horse watering trough with usually one heat lamp is sufficient. This time, I don't know, I put a pine cone in. I thought maybe they needed a mother figure. I have tried putting a female quail, an adult, in with the babies, thinking maybe they would like that and she might give them some attention, but she just looked really freaked out, and so I took her out right away. So there's water and enough warmth to keep them happy. For the first couple of days, they like to be at about 100 degrees. And right out of the egg, they know how to run around, find water, find food. I feed them a game bird crumble, which is a 20% protein feed. And when they're this small, I usually use my mixer to grind it up into a smaller size, almost like a powder. Just have observed that it's easier for them to eat when they're so tiny. Quail grow incredibly fast. This is about 3 weeks old. So you can see they've got most of their adult feathers. Their heads are the last thing to sort of feather out. In 7 to 8 weeks, the males will be eating size. And it takes the females, when I first started, I read online, it was something like 9 weeks for them to start laying eggs. In my experience, it's been more 11, 12 weeks. So about half the time that takes a chicken. And introducing young birds to an older flock. The birds on the far side of the fence are probably around 2 years old, so they're getting towards the end of their laying productivity, and there's a little youngster looking at what she will become, checking out the yard. My quail coop here has a sort of indoor coop area that has a roof and walls with windows that are open to the air. And then there's a run, which is a fully enclosed but open to the elements. It has chicken wire all around it, partly because quail fly, and partly because everything eats them, from birds to raccoons, the usual predators. Also snakes will swallow a quail, which I found out my first year. So the first foot around the bottom of the coop has a finer mesh to protect them from the serpents. Sexing the male and female Coturnix quail is relatively easy. The females have a speckled chest and the males have a red chest. One year I decided to hatch white quail so that I could tell the difference between my generations. I thought that was very smart. But then it turned out when I needed to sex them, I couldn't tell them apart because everybody was white. So that involved a less pleasant experience of checking everybody's cloaca for foam, which, you know, is kind of a fun experience, but the quail didn't really enjoy it and it was a hassle for me. So I like to, in the yard, provide the quail with what I would consider a natural habitat. People's discarded Christmas trees at the end of December are a really nice thing I can just throw in there. They love getting under there. This is an old one that's dried out, but they'll find little places to make nests. And they generally make collective nests together that shift around the coop. It's a little bit of a egg hunt every day to find all the caches around the yard. So when I'm selling my eggs at the stand, I package them in this fashion. Right now, there aren't size and grade standards for quail eggs, so that's pretty easy for me. The container and label just has to say how many eggs, the origin of the eggs, and the species, which we've got on there. This is just a super simple label on a piece of paper that I attach with a little sticker on the back, so it's fairly easy to assemble. Here's a slide. It's fairly fabricated just from my own experience. I am not that great at keeping records, hence the grimacy face. I'm running a vegetable farm on top of taking care of the quail, so as a lot of farmers may attest, the record keeping and note-taking side are sometimes the last thing that get done or doesn't get done at all, but I generally know the numbers that make my business profitable. So this is a slide that's working off of about a 300 bird flock, assuming that when I start putting numbers out, I usually try to give myself a conservative estimate so that I'm not at the end of the year thinking I was supposed to make $12,000 and actually I made 10,000 or 8,000. So the profit side is assuming that I'm selling my dozens for $4.50 each, which is my wholesale rate to the restaurant. When I sell them at the farm stand, they can go for $6 or $7. I just put the lower rate into the profit side. And then the cost is just working off of a 50-pound bag of food for me. I don't get organic feed. I feel that the quality of life that I provide the quail make up for the food not being the top of the line, but it works for me. So the bags are about $20 each, usually go about 2 bags a week. I would estimate caring for the quail, which includes feeding, egg collecting, washing and packaging and delivery, accounts for about 8 hours of labor. And we arrive at our net profit. So this is a relatively small portion of my business. However, for my farm brand, if you'd want to call it that, the quail are a really significant part of my business. There are thousands of small scale organic vegetable farmers in California, but this is something that really distinguishes me from the rest of them. I did not get asked to this conference to talk about vegetables. I got asked to talk about quail. So that's a pretty important factor for me, considering how they work into my overall business. This is my quail egg washer that a friend built for me. It's powered by a drill. And the eggs are a little crowded up at the end because I'm videoing. Usually I'm putting eggs on one side and pulling them off the other. They're getting sprayed with water, and this is a bristly brush that scrubs them. I was very skeptical when my friend built this for me that it would actually work, but it does a great job. They come out sparkling clean and they don't break, which are the 2 goals. So because I have lots of vegetables on the farm, the quail do get supplemented with a fair bit of wonderful organic greens. They're partial to chard. They're less happy about kale. They're kind of like, you know, a 5-year-old. They want lettuces, but they don't want something too much roughage. They love tomatoes and zucchini, and they get lots of things like that. When my quail are old, and also when I hatch quail, I end up with males. I have 2 times of the year that I have to harvest quail. I think that the quail meat business is probably a really great business for somebody to get into. I hate killing them, so I've decided to focus on the eggs. That being said, I really care about the welfare of my birds, so I don't want to send them to a facility to have them processed. I really want that to happen as kindly and swiftly as possible, so I do it myself. But I've found that it's an experience that a lot of people would like to have, and I really need the help. I'm usually doing about 200 birds at a time, and it's on my day off. So I will sometimes offer it as a workshop for people to come out. A quail is a really good animal to get the first experience of taking a life. They are very cute, but they're a little bit less cute than a bunny. And they don't scream like pigs. So I have had good success having people come out, and they are actually helpful, and they really enjoy and learn a lot from those experiences. So here's what some of my birds look like when they're processed. They need to be cleaned off. I don't know, I can't tell if these are old birds or young birds in this picture, but there is a ready market for even older stew birds that are quail. I was actually surprised. I never have any trouble getting rid of my meat. And we don't want to end a presentation on dead animals. This is a question when I was selling at a farmer's market that I got a lot. What do you do with quail eggs? They're eggs. I mean, you could do whatever you do with a chicken egg with a quail egg. Probably don't make an omelet. It's just not the highest purpose. You can't tell how sweet and cute they are. On the left-hand side is a moderately extravagant pasta making with quail eggs. I think I didn't have any chicken eggs, but my refrigerator was stuffed with quail eggs, so I used them to make some pasta. It was delicious. But just cooking it for your breakfast, sunny side up over some mushrooms is delicious. Hard boiled, they make a really great hiking snack. And in a lot of restaurants, they're eaten raw on sushi, oyster shooters. People get pretty creative. And we'll end on the weirdest egg I've ever found in the coop. I need to do a little bit more research on how the color is applied to the eggs, but from what I've observed, it's sort of printed onto the shell as it comes out of the egg, like an inkjet printer. If you pick up an egg right when it's been laid, the spots are tacky and they can smudge. I've seen eggs come out with smudge lines on them. I don't know what was going on with this quail, but it's a very remarkable and beautiful egg. And that's my business.
Right. First of all, I wanted to congratulate you both on your businesses and what you guys have been able to build. It's very impressive. I'm jealous in the sense that you guys get to live in, two of the most beautiful places in the world. So I've been to Point Reyes Station. I've given a talk at a schoolhouse over there. There's some old schoolhouse that you feel like you're in the middle of a Norman Rockwell picture. And I've also been out to Gonzales, obviously, several times to see the Metzer Farm with students, which is a fascinating place. And that's in this kind of the salad bowl of California where they grow everything you can imagine, all the different types of lettuce and broccoli and a lot of different types of birds also. And there's the John Steinbeck Center there. So if you're ever when we're traveling around California, that's a great place to visit too. And they have a great agricultural exhibit I saw several years ago. So if you're ever in that part of California, I encourage you guys to visit it. So I had a couple different questions, but before I start asking some questions, are there any questions in the room or digitally? So let's maybe start with in the room first.
Thank you for both your presentations. It's on, yeah. So I've only ever had chicken eggs, and I'm wondering what the taste difference is for both quail and duck eggs, and if there is much of a taste difference.
I would say there isn't a huge difference in the taste of a quail egg. I find the yolk to be possibly a little more creamy tasting when it's hard boiled, but it's fairly similar.
Duck egg. I've never had a quail egg. Actually, that's not true. I have at the sushi restaurants. Duck egg is a richer flavor, and there is a creamier texture to it. And I agree. It kind of depends how you cook it. Scrambled eggs, I can't really tell a difference, but people have different profiles. People can taste different things. It's like wine. I can't really tell the difference between a $20 and $100, but there's people that can. And definitely with eggs, there's people. I used to do a farmer's market in San Francisco, and we'd give out samples of soft boiled. And there's people that right off the bat, they could just notice a huge difference. And there's people that say, I can't tell the difference at all. So, but in general, richer flavor.
Any other questions in the room?
In regards to duck eggs, read where it seems to be a new baking item. Have you run across that market yet?
Baking, I know that they're better for meringues because they will create a bigger peak and a stiffer peak that will last longer. That is from a chef that's told me that. It does take longer for it to whip up though. So you're gonna have to put it in your stand mixer and just let it be for a while before they start to peak, foam up. Whereas a chicken egg is a lot quicker. Unfortunately, I have not seen them on the Great British Baking Show, and I really look forward to that. Yeah, but a general consensus is they're better for baking, but I don't know the science behind it.
Excuse me. This is more directed toward Molly. You mentioned that you originally wanted to be a chicken farmer. Would you ever consider switching to that?
I still really have a soft spot in my heart for chickens. I feel fairly committed to the quail. They're part of my farm's identity at this point. I'd love to have chickens be incorporated, but I wouldn't ever switch over fully. Can't abandon the quail.
No, never.
Just kidding. Chickens are the dark side for you guys. Okay, so that was, if there are more questions either in the room or digitally, feel free to keep chiming in. So one of the questions I had, so I'm a veterinarian and I'm in extension. So, but I also have to confess, I know nothing about quail and very little about ducks and waterfowl in general. And I guess I just had a general question. So Marc just got back from APA, the American Pasture Poultry Producers Association. That extra P always throws me off, but got it that time. And I'm curious, what resources you guys go to for veterinary resources, or just for, what is your kind of network like when it comes to trying to, answer all the questions that you did? You had a great friend that was able to make this pretty clever egg washer. But I wonder if you guys could kind of speak to that a little.
Okay. So where do I get my information and what's a resource? Well, okay. The information that I search for is biosecurity and hatchery related questions. And for those things, for the hatchery, my first choice, or where I go, is through James Way Hatchery. They're who we use for our incubators and hatchers. And so it's a company, and the reason that they're a resource for us is because we're buying incubators from them. But they are they have people on their staff that used to run chicken hatcheries for 30 plus years, or turkey hatcheries, or duck hatcheries. So I go there. I took a couple poultry classes at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, but other than that, I've had no formal training on poultry. So I a lot of times do just Google, and UC Davis or Cornell, a lot of these universities have good research and information on their websites. So I'll use that. I think those are my main. And then we also have Dr. Bland. He's a veterinarian in California. He is a wealth of knowledge for us too. And I ask him questions.
I have found information on quail and quail raising to be fairly sparse. I mostly check the internet, but I've been primarily self-taught. I have experience in animal care for many years of all different species. And I think mostly what I've done is observe my birds, and I've observed the native quail and what they do. There are some significant differences. When I first got my quail, I loaded up their enclosure with branches and things that they could get up into, and they didn't care about those things at all. They're very much a ground-dwelling bird. They don't really care about nest boxes. They'll lay their eggs, like I said, communally, but in random places, and the places switch daily. In terms of their health, I really haven't had any disease issues, but when I have tried to look for questions that I have about the physical needs of quail, there really hasn't been much information. So if anyone has a resource that they'd like to share, I'm open.
You're kind of reminding me, so in veterinary school, when you learn about small animals, you have an hour lecture for whatever topic you're talking about, and you usually spend 45 minutes talking about dogs, and then the last 5 minutes talking about cats. So it's the same thing with poultry. There's kind of this assumption that you can apply what you learn about chicken and turkeys to some of these alternative species, and that's not always true, obviously. So it is a space where there's definitely a huge knowledge gap. Something that hopefully we can help address. And the goal of these kind of workshops is to be able to provide these kind of resources on YouTube channels, so people can chime in and hopefully have that resource.
I would say APA is a great resource, but I'm not really looking on how to do pasture poultry, so I'm not going to them for those types of questions. But if I was, they would be one of my first stops.
I'm wondering if you can also, before we kind of go back out to the audience for some questions, I'm wondering if you can comment kind of on Maya's talk and just your impressions of welfare in general and how you guys evaluate comfort, and just what your impressions are of what she spoke about. Is that something, were there practical suggestions in there? Was it more aspirational? What was your just general sense of that topic area? Because that's obviously really important to your clients. I was wondering, the shower, she had bathing, nipple shower. I was wanting to know what that consisted of and what the design was, or how do you put a shower in a poultry barn. I think one of the signs of a good housing system or humane system is good production, and being a hatchery, good production is a priority, and good fertility and clean eggs. Those are all priorities for us in biosecurity. And I think all those come naturally with humane practices of treating the ducks and everything like that. So it's important to us. The humane certified, I've reached out to them asking how we as a hatchery could be certified. One of the problems is that we do mail order shipping, and they're focused on hatcheries that deliver to the farm. So
they had to be on the farm within a day, and that's impossible with us. But they're willing to work with us because I want to be part of their organization. But under their current standards, it's impossible. But if we could follow all the others, it would be neat if we could do it. And I think it is important that everybody always keeps that in mind.
My quail's welfare is a high priority for me, and I don't have guidelines that come from a governmental organization or a humane organization, but as far as I can see, the setup that I have for my quail far exceeds any kind of situation that I've seen commercial poultry producers having. It's much more of a backyard chicken situation. Like I said, the quails have a run, they have a protected area, protected from the elements, but they have a very dynamic space that they can be in. They can, one thing that I have found that is really important for quail is they like to dust bathe. It's part of what keeps their feathers in good shape. It keeps them free of mites and pests. So having a space in the yard that has dirt that they can scratch around in and clean themselves, but they're always getting fresh greens. They can choose where they want to be. It feels very unconfined, as much as can be for flying birds. And I spend a lot of time observing them. When I'm collecting eggs, I'm looking at how the quail are behaving. I have a little quail hospital, which is a cat carrier that goes into my house anytime there's a quail who's limping or sometimes has a blood mark from some unexplained activity, and they get personal care. And so, yeah, I feel that the care I give the birds is very, very good.
Are there any other questions?
One more question online.
This is directed toward duck manure, but open it up to all manure. They'd like to know what you do with the manure. Do you sell it?
Per our insurance company, we are not allowed to sell the manure off of our farm because it becomes a liability with food safety for all the vegetables that are around our farm that could use that manure. I'm sure everybody's heard of recalls with romaine and spinach and all that. That didn't come from us. Just saying that's a high priority for all the farmers. So what we do is there is a vineyard that composts it. So every load that they pick up, we have them donate $100 to a local charity. So they don't get it for free, but we're not making any money off of it.
The coop that I have been working with, like I said, has a dirt floor. So the manure is fairly difficult to reclaim. I will muck it out. There's straw that collects the manure, but as of right now, it gets composted on the farm. I would really like to be able to use that with my vegetable production. I have fantasies of fermenting it in a sort of bubbler kind of compost tea situation, kind of remediating the pathogen risks. I have a lot of fantasies on the farm that I haven't quite gotten to yet. The coop that is being built right now has a cement floor, so that's going to help with reclaiming the manure because I think that quail manure is highly useful. I'm sure that it'll be great for the vegetables.
Yeah, so that's a wide open topic as far as composting, and the rules in California are complex. And we're actually going to have some speakers, I believe, next week from the state of California who will be talking about relevant regulations. It is kind of interesting. As long as you keep the material on site, you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. Once you take it off site, then some of these regulations kind of come into play, which are challenging. And I think that kind of dovetails to kind of this question I think I asked some of our farmers last week, which was, we live in, for better or for worse, a very regulatory centric kind of state when it comes to rules. And some of those rules are great and useful and innovative and creative, and some of them are challenging. And I'm wondering if you can speak to, if you were governor for a day, what would be the regulations that you would want? Would it be on the marketing side that something that you're not able to do because of thresholds of the number of birds that you can have to process? Would it be on the food safety side? Is there an aspect of your business that you can't take advantage of yet because of some rules that we have that were maybe well intended but don't allow you to kind of do the things that you'd want?
Honestly, I don't really feel that there's regulations that are holding us back or making life hard for us. I don't know if it'd be different if I was a chicken farmer or a turkey farmer, but I don't feel like there's times where I'm sitting in my office doing paperwork just hating what I'm doing or feeling like I'm doing nothing important. For duck eggs, there is no regulation. So I would like guidance or some type of something that I hate using the word regulation, but something with sizing or shelf life of the duck eggs, how to sell them in the market, because an issue that we're having is what we call a large or a jumbo or a medium is different than any other duck farmer selling duck eggs. How many days we put on the duck eggs is different than somebody else. And I have retailers or distributors or food service places asking for food safety certification, and it's really hard to get an audit for duck eggs when there is no certification or guidelines for a duck egg farm. So in that area, I think it'd be useful to have some of those clear guidances. But if I was governor for a day, I don't think poultry would be my first topic.
I feel similarly. I don't feel held back by any regulations in terms of what I'm able to do with my eggs. But I feel like if you're running a poultry operation and you have a good system for the welfare of the animals, that the safety of the product that you're producing is fairly high. If the animals are healthy, the product will be healthy. I don't like doing paperwork, and I find that in general, the guidelines that do come out in other areas add hassle and extra hoops that I have to jump through that I don't feel are necessary on the scale that I'm at, which is very small, very artisanal. There's a lot of attention paid to all aspects. I see that being a problem when farms grow to larger sizes and there isn't maybe as much individual care and oversight. I don't know what the policy would be to ensure better welfare for the animals if I were governor, but it would be something in that realm. I think that translates into a safer product when animals are well cared for.
Yeah, it's a difficult kind of conversation for small farmers because the regulations in general by the FDA for the egg safety rule or the USDA for processing, California's own welfare regulations, they're made for large farms, and it truly is the square peg in the round hole when you try to apply those to smaller farms. And the challenge from my perspective is always like, well, where do you draw that line? Because the smaller farms are much different facilities. They're harder for regulators, and it is a challenge. And at some level, you want the farm to really follow the spirit of the rule, which is to have animals be healthy and to address any food safety issues, even if they're not always following the letter of the law. And that's a challenge sometimes for regulators and for the farmers who are trying to comply to follow that spirit of the law. So I think the other question I had, and Molly, you kind of alluded to it, and I thought it was interesting when you were talking about the quail meat and how much of a demand there is for that. So if you guys had, now you're not governor for a day, now you've got an extra pair of hands, or you've got some extra land. When you think about what would you want to add or subtract, or from just a profit perspective, because this meeting is really meant for beginning farmers. So USDA defines that anything 10 years and younger as far as farming experience. So I think probably people are listening and thinking like, well, what aspect of what Molly's doing is the most profitable, and probably makes the most sense for people to start, kind of thinking about moving into those different types of spaces. So if you had some more land or you had some more people, what would you guys do? Do you think you've kind of hit that sweet spot? And if you have hit that sweet spot, what did you have to cut out in order to get to that sweet spot?
I think we've hit the sweet spot with waterfowl. But to answer, a different way to answer your question is I do think that there's markets out there. I think live poultry markets for supplying different ethnicities. I get a feeling that there's a lot of opportunity there, whether it's certain colored bird chickens or live geese or live colored ducks, not just the white Pekin duck, going into different Asian markets. I think there's opportunity there. Salted duck eggs, fresh salted duck eggs. There's a ton of pre-cooked salted duck eggs being imported from China, but I know that the Asian population prefers fresh salted duck egg, and those were stopped. Those are illegal to import from China, the fresh ones. So I know that there's a need out there for those. I would love to do all these things, but I just don't have enough time. And so I think that's another thing is if I had more time, what would I be doing? And I'd be doing all that. But what we do now is specializing in hatching ducklings and goslings. I feel like we do a pretty good job at it, and that's what we're focused on. And so that's what we're just going to continue doing.
If I had more land on my farm to dedicate to something that would be profitable, it would be a ice cream vending machine probably, because it's pretty hard to make a lot of money being a farmer. But that being said, I think it is really important. I don't see a lot of elements to raising quail that could capture a large profit that I'm not already exploiting. There's always something that could, the feathers from when we're harvesting birds could be turned into some kind of fertilizer, and the manure could be as well. And we could turn the gizzards into some kind of specialty quail pate. But when you're thinking of a new revenue stream or product to be marketing, it's really important to look at the entire picture rather than just getting excited that you can do something, because that's not necessarily going to be profitable. A lot of those extra cool things take a lot of time, and on a farm, your labor cost is, at least for me, my highest cost. So if it's taking another person or taking another several hours, that's a really big consideration for me, that on the selling side, it's going to account for that extra time. I think that there's also a choice to be made, and I feel privileged to be able to make the choice to sell eggs and not meat. But that's my own ethical decision. I do not enjoy killing the birds. I raise them from babies. I have cared for animals my whole life, and it's just not something that I want to be doing. I've decided to forego that revenue stream, but the eggs feel really good to me to be selling, and I think that they make sense as a business in conjunction with my vegetable production.
Just a comment.
Resource, you speak of the American Pastured Poultry Producers. They do offer proceedings of their whole convention. If you check their website, it's cheaper than going to the convention.
So I've got a quick question for both of you, which is how old are you letting your birds get before you decide they're not productive enough to keep around? And then the other question is, both of you have niche products, so how do you go about deciding how much to charge for your product? How did you come to that?
I make it all up. I don't know. I sell the eggs I made up. I think originally I was selling them for $6 a dozen. I was contacted by a restaurant. Obviously I couldn't offer them eggs at $6 a dozen when they could be getting the ones from China for, I think they're going for $3, or it's a very, very low price. They were in a position to offer to meet me halfway, which is how I arrived at the $4.50. I thought that was generous on their end. And it certainly makes sense when I do the numbers at the scale that I'm at. What was the first part of the question? Oh, you know, at this point, I'm basing it on chicken information. I've been raising quail for about 6 years, and I'm still trying to figure out when the right moment is to cull my flock. Like I said, I'm also running a vegetable farm, so I'm not always hitting the exact marker. It's sort of when the quail can be harvested is just when it makes sense and I have time. It's usually around 2 years.
Ducks we keep for 16 months. Geese we keep for 4 to 5 years. Your second question was, how do we determine prices? We raise prices every year because our labor is going up even more every year. And so we're basing it off of basically what we think our labor is going to be, and feed costs. Labor and feed are our biggest expenses by far, and so it's based off of that.
So to that point, can both of you kind of just talk about what types, if any, types of spreadsheets or software you guys use to try it? I know, Molly, you said that, you know, this is the stuff, and this is the hard stuff for farmers because it's the last thing you want to do at night. But can you just speak to what you've tried, what you think's worked, what hasn't worked, and whether it's on the plant side, the crop side, or on the animal side?
I was set up with an Excel spreadsheet that does a cost, profit and loss analysis for my business. So I can track my quail, egg production and sales, and all of the vegetables. I can divide it out between strawberries and tomatoes and peppers if I want to get that specific and see how much each item is making me and how much each one is costing, and have a net profit number at the end. It's a very basic system and not to the scale of QuickBooks. I recently went to a workshop to teach farmers about QuickBooks and about accounting and the business side of it. It had a limited scope because QuickBooks doesn't make it easy. It's also a very general program for businesses, and farms are really specific businesses. So I have the program, and if anyone wants to tutor me on how to use it, it's very complicated. But it's one of my goals is to have a more sophisticated business analysis system.
We use QuickBooks. I don't use QuickBooks. Yeah, so taking a finance class is one of my goals, a business finance class. So we use QuickBooks. We use Google Sheets for keeping data on our flocks. The convenience of that is it's easy to share with different people in your company or wherever. That's how I sent my PowerPoint presentation here, is just through Google. Google PowerPoint or presentation. And then we also use a custom software developed for our hatchery. And because, again, a hatchery is a unique business too. And we're not like a shoe store where you could just buy shoes and they're delivered to you as soon as possible. People have to pick on what date they want the ducks shipped. And since we have 35 different breeds of ducks and geese, and they want to order 5 different breeds, it might take 7 weeks before all those are available at the same time. So there's a lot of intricacies with that. So those are some of the systems that we use.
We had a question asking for a recap or I guess advice on egg washing equipment. You guys could expand on that a bit.
Egg washing equipment, that's always a hot topic at the APA conferences, the pasture poultry, because nobody's found a good egg washer for a small farmer, plain and simple. We're using one of the smallest commercial egg washers, and we're a fairly large duck farm. So, most egg washers are made to wash 100,000 eggs an hour. And we would have to collect eggs for a long time before we got to use it for an hour. So I don't have a good answer for egg washing. People use bubblers where it's like a bathtub with air being compressed in it. And so air is bubbling up like a jacuzzi, just using that. The model that you had on your PowerPoint, I've seen models like that. It's a little bit bigger. There's different detergents you can use. It's really hit and miss. And duck eggs are really hard because they're really, really dirty. So warm water and soap.
Well, you saw my egg washer. It was built by a friend. It's run by a drill. It feels like I'm playing an instrument, putting them on and taking them off at the same time. But it's a vast improvement over rubbing each egg with a towel, which is what I was doing before my friend saw me and said, no, this is not going to work. So sometimes you've got friends who are good at fabricating or coming up with a design. As a farmer, I find what I'm actually going to make my money on is all of the inventions that I come up with regularly for how a tool that I need to do this specific job that just isn't out there yet. So if anyone is a good, designer or fabricator, please see me. We could be millionaires. Yeah, egg washing is, I think, a challenge.
Yeah, you guys, by definition, have to be very creative and innovative, or else your labor and goes up significantly. Oh.
How many eggs per day on average do each of your birds give?
It really depends on the time of year. So they're most productive in the height of the summer when the days are the longest. And it also depends on how many quail I have at the time. So quail are like chickens. They'll lay about an egg a day. In the height of their production, they'll do about 300 eggs a year. So if you've got 300 birds, anywhere from 200, 250 a day.
I have actually a similar answer to Molly's. For us, it depends on what breed you're talking about. Our best breeds will get almost up to 300, but then we have breeds that are low hundreds. So it really depends. And those ones will cost more too. The ones that lay less eggs will cost more typically.
So the last question I had, so again, this is part of a USDA grant for beginning farmers. And I guess the last question I had is what kind of advice, you guys have done this for a while, you guys have learned a lot, either through some kind of story or what kind of, I guess basically what kind of advice would you offer to a new farmer that's interested in this space, and kind of speak from your experience. I know, Molly, you're doing something that I think that I've realized over the last couple of years that a lot of small pastured farmers are doing, where they are mixing poultry and different crops, and that's a challenge and a really interesting area to work in. But there's definitely, I would imagine, a lot of lessons learned along the way for both of you. So what kind of advice would you give to a new farmer listening?
Marketing should be a priority. I know people that refuse to do farmers market because they feel that time could be better spent in front of their computer working on marketing, and they've done a really good job. But I know I did farmers markets too, and it was really enjoyable. And that's part of marketing, as well as teaching people how to use duck eggs and all that stuff. But I would say, know your marketing, learn your customer. Ducks specifically, they're easy to grow. That's not, it's the selling that you want to do, and you don't want to sell cheap. So the better your marketing, the more you can ask for your product.
Yeah, I would echo that. Know where your product is going to end up. You start backward. You start at the end and work back to the beginning. Know who you're going to sell to, and then you can figure out the rest. Because the growing of the vegetables, the growing of the birds, it's not easy, but I see people who have a product all of a sudden, it's perishable and they haven't developed the markets, and then it's a big hustle on how to get them sold. I would say also, if you're in my boat and you don't have a big, you don't take out a huge loan, or you don't have a backer, start small. Farming is a very risky business, and if you don't have a lot of experience, there's just a lot of ways things could not work out. I'm a much better farmer 6 years after my first farming experience. A lot of that has to do with all of the things I did wrong. So just know, I think my first 2 years, I cried at least 3 times a week out of frustration or failure. But I'm really interested in what I'm doing, so I have become a very keen observer, and that, I think, has been one of the most important things to me. I've learned from my mistakes. I haven't had a lot of time to go to other farms and see what other people are doing, so it's been a part of the joy for me is that creative challenge of figuring out how to solve problems that arise daily. But know that failure is really a part of the game, and if you can embrace it and be creative about it, then there's a possibility of moving forward.
a book recommendation is The Lean Farmer, which talks about lean, the Toyota system, Kaizen, all that stuff. That's been a hot topic at APA, is lean and how to make your farm lean, and basically continuous improvements in your processes. And he does talk a lot about focusing on products that you spend less time on or make you more money. Or what you're doing with your quail eggs, that's a marketing tool for you. So that will bring you a chef that needs those quail eggs, and then he'll buy other vegetables since he's there. So that's a really cool book that I'd recommend.
Great. Any last questions before we wrap up? Okay, well, thank you for coming here, and thank everyone online, and everyone have a good week. Thanks again.